David had to part ways once they were back on the ship. Their flight was a bit more awkward than David wanted, but she seemed to be thinking things over intently. So David left her to her trains of thought. He had found his way to the gym's combat room, entering as Keonris was thrown, and landed on his back. "How is he holding up Samantha?" David said as she walked a bit away, taking a drink from her bottle before looking over at him. "His combat skills are—" Samantha looked over to where Keonris was breathing hard while staying on the floor. "Interesting. He has a lot of the basic fundamentals down, but that's it. Like he never got extra training." David saw Keonris try to raise his hand to protest, but was lacking the energy. "He didn't. He is a son of an unfavored maid of a matriarch, and he is her 15th son, so she wouldn't even care what he did unless it reflects badly on her clan," David said back to Samantha, making her visage shift to pity. Keonris tried to add, but was still breathing hard as he stared up into the ceiling. "Yes, Keonris, I know, but that is why she is training you," David said before looking over to Samantha. "Did you and Angela find anything?" "Yeah, about 1 in every 10 have it, all used up. The interesting thing is that the ones that have it are all underdeveloped," Samantha said as she walked over and leaned on her knees, watching Keonris trying hard to catch his breath. "The interesting part is all of them are sons of the unfavorable suitors, like ones that seemed right to be leaders, but suddenly lost favor after one son." She poked Keonris's head. "Keonris, are you the only son of your sire?" David asked after a few seconds to let him have enough breath to speak. "Yeah, I have 6 sisters," Keonris said right away. "But I don't understand why that matters." "For now, it doesn't," David said flatly. "Samantha, keep him going until he can't catch his breath, then send him to me." David walked away. Something about this chip stuff didn't add up. 1 in every 10, the Zandraphane Conclave kept their birth rate a public record, and they generally have an offset to males than females of about 7 to 3, so why is 1 of every 10 males had the chip? He needed more information about this and needed to tell Earth. David found the archives, and while he never needed to come here, it is the best place for information, used as a repository for all the basic knowledge a new race would need to integrate with the community, to also act as an easy library for the crew if they need information, and the data it contains is updated once a week when in comms range of a community station. So for David's questions, it was a perfect place to start his search. As David approached one of the user tablets, he glanced around the room. Most of the crew that was here right now are medical staff and some security, all of whom are looking up information about other races, probably looking to figure out something their culture wouldn't do. The tablet itself was great, as you could ask it, or type up your questions, and the Gavi would present all relevant and semi-relevant information for you. David started with the most prudent questions he had. "Do the Zandraphane Conclave practice genetic modification?" He typed in and waited for the results. The answer wasn't a surprise to him. Historical records show that at one point in their history, they did use genetic modification and remodeling in an effort to improve their race. However, most tests were deemed failures. They currently are marked in the community as a race that no longer practices such actions. David sucked on his inside cheek and typed a new question. "Can I see the records and test results?" The test results are not stored on board as they are marked as a species-specific breach of safety. However, here are the records ZC 1808, 6 ZC 1810, 8 ZC 1823, 2 ZC 1823. 4. David spent the better part of an hour reading all of them. The information felt wrong to David, like there are parts of the story missing. The survivors of the test were given medical care and were later allowed to just leave, but their records say that they were all prime examples of Zandraphanes. Bulky and smart, however, they were left weakened by the test. And none of them were old, too, most relatively young, just reaching into their prime. And David had a new question. "Do you have a genealogical line for Keonris Keonarno focusing on the sire line?" "Here you go. The genealogical line for Keonris Keonarno." David scrolled down the line and found it about 800 years back. Keonris was connected by a perfect line to one of the test subjects that had failed, but that didn't make anything clearer. Can you show a list of true siblings of Alaris Hincarno? Here you go. David looked at the list. Alaris had 5 true sisters, all of whom were on this ship, but only one brother, and he was the youngest at just under 17 years old. Show Joaris Hincarno genealogical line of Joaris Hincarno. David scrolled to 800 years ago, and there it was one of the test subjects, Alaris's great-great-great-grandfather. David's stomach formed a new knot as 2 clear possibilities came to his mind, and he shook at the thought of the second one being the case. He wouldn't get much more answers without Alaris's help on this, but he wasn't sure if he should tell her or not, but that is something he would have to solve later. For now, Kianris would be about done, so best for David to get back to his cabin. As David came around the corner, he saw Kianris sitting beside his door, sucking in hard breaths and drinking water. Samantha definitely pushed the poor guy. "Kianris, good to see you still alive," David said with a smile and reached down a hand to help him up. "I wish I wasn't. My whole body hurts, but Angela said I was fine," Kianris said back as he took David's offer and came onto his feet. "I am starting to get the sense I have made a massive mistake." David nodded a bit along as he opened his door. "Not going to back out, are you?" David asked with a cheek grin and sassy tone. "No, sir," Kianris snapped back. "Besides, it's not like I ever really tried until today. It would be a great dishonor to Clan Hincarno." "So in a week, then," David added in. "Maybe I will have to see." Kianris said back and waited while David sat down on the bed. "Well, don't stand like an idiot. Sit down." David gestured at the chair by his desk, an offer Kianris took and relaxed a bit. "So, what do you want to talk about?" "I was hoping you could explain something," Hirth said. Kianris spoke, his voice showing hesitation. "He told Samantha it would be faster to replace my muscle centers with synthetics." David smiled at the fact this is what Kianris wanted to know about. "Okay. So Hirth was suggesting we replace your muscles with artificial ones like him. That way you wouldn't need to train." "Wait, what do you mean artificial?" Kianris asked after a second. "Non-natural, made by living beings." David answered and continued with an explanation. "The muscles he is referring to are synthetic, hyperweaved microfibers that can stretch and contract like normal muscles, but they don't require an intake of nutrients or daily exercise to maintain. The only downside is your only way for getting more is by undergoing surgery to add more. Hirth is at the limit his bones can handle, and his bones are still natural, so yeah." "So is this cybernetics thing common among humans?" Kianris asked with enthusiasm, his interest showing in full. "It is not uncommon. The last census shows that about 10% of the human population is cybernetically enhanced in some way, and most use it as a way to solve medical or physical issues. Riggs had his airways replaced to get rid of his asthma, and I think Daniela had her spine replaced, but I don't know why, as she has asked me not to look into it. The point is, cybernetics can be used to help people that had a bad hand in life. Some use it to improve their lives, and some need it to maintain their lives. Each reason could be as different from the next." "Do you have any changes?" Kianris asked quickly. "No, I am still 100% natural as long as you don't count the bones I needed replacing. They don't do anything, just a bit of a rib," David said. Kianris soaked in the information and looked down to his hand, flexing it a few times. "Do you think I could get something?" he finally asked. David leaned back a bit and tilted his head up while he thought about it. "Well, yes, you could. However, anything overt like a full arm replacement would make your kind shun you, your religion forbidding the alteration of the forms your goddess made you," David said as he refocused on Kianris. "That being said, there is also the issue of no doctor training in the building or installation of cybernetics ever having worked on a Xandraphane. It would take maybe years before they would be ready to try. And the procedure may kill you even if they succeed in the installation." "So why did Hirth get them?" Kianris asked, his face showing confusion. David thought about it before answering. "Hirth got his after a brutal boarding action against some pirates before humanity joined the war. He had been the one to take down the captain, and the captain heavily augmented. Hirth said it was the hardest fight he had in his life and chose to get the replacement so that he would know that he is one of the strongest humans alive short of going full cyborg. So he saw himself as weak after that fight and wanted to be better," Kianris reasoned. I suppose, but you would need to bother him about it, David said with a smile that said do just that. Keonris looked at his hand again, now closing it into a fist, and opening it while extending his claws. I was thinking earlier that maybe I should get the enhancements that Hearth had, but now that I think about it, I don't want any, he said as he stared at his hand. It's like some part of me knows there is more in my body to give, but it can't find what it's looking for. Well, my team is going to look into it. After we get that chip out, we can have a closer look and see what it did, David said with a reassuring smile. Besides, I don't think it was anything bad, just a quirk of your culture, probably. Keonris locked his eyes on David's visor and nodded. I think I am out of questions for now. I'll see you tomorrow at breakfast, he said as he got up and headed to the door. Yep, sounds good. And talk with Angela before you get something to eat. Have her point out what you should get. David called to him before the door closed. David was left in his room as he threw his body back to lay on the bed, his head still trying to figure out what the hell is going on with Keonris, and what the hell is up with that chip. However, his musings were cut short as a request to enter came. David let out a sigh and stood with a wave of his hand. David was expecting Allis or one of his crew, someone with a need to speak with him, someone that has some kind of dealing with him. However, Janris was not the person he wanted to speak with right now, and the slight shadows beyond the door told David that her mates were just outside waiting for her, an unappealing idea of them rushing him. 4 to 1 is impossible for him, and that is assuming that she doesn't join in the fight, but his most pressing issue was the Xandradane approaching him. The fact she was here wasn't all that bad. He would have liked a chance to speak to her. He did yell at her during the mess on Jaunakul, and he need to apologize and make it clear that his actions were necessary for the mission. But the issue was that she wanted something very different. She was out of uniform, dressed in a robe like when Allis was meditating, the sash holding it closed while pressing her breast up, her tail swinging with excitement like she could tell where he was looking. Her face was telling her plan to have him, and a smile that spoke volume of how much she knew she was trying something that would break Alaris's faith in him. All of it told him she was up to no good. What can I assist you with, Janris? David asked, his voice calm and tone a bit cold. She took a step to him, her smile growing wider. Oh, my sweet David, you know why I am here, she said as her hand reached up to her sash and pulled slowly. Are you here to offer to satisfy my urges? David asked, but felt that was her justification for this visit. See, are you surprised? She asked as she got within arm's reach, her sash pulled free and dropped to the floor. No, I'm not. I suspect that you think you need to because it is exactly what you believe needs to happen. Goddess forbids a mate to be left too long without his hunger quelled, David said plainly, and took a step back from her as she reached him. But you miscalculated. I am not a weak-willed mate like those of your kin, and you should know that I am faithful to Allis. Speaking of which, is she aware of your presence here in my den? Janris's face shifted to restrained anger as he left her reach. She knows what is needed. She didn't need to tell me. She is carrying, and now she will not be accessible to you. So I came to soothe your hunger, she said as she reaches up and moves her open robe aside to expose her chest to him. Besides, I know you crave me too. I saw how you looked at me when I came to the command station. You looked hungry for me. Her voice sounded as inviting as she could muster. David couldn't help but snort with laughter, causing her veneer to break to wrath. Sorry, no, I am not interested in you. I do appreciate the gesture behind your actions, but I have nothing to give you, David said quickly. But she used all her power to press him to the wall, her hands gripping tightly and claws prodding his skin. How dare you? You would reject the aid from me, the hero of my people and elder daughter of the clan you serve. She growled, her eyes wreathed in rage. David slowly took her hands and, with a bit of force, peeled them away. I had told you once that I am bound to Allis by my customs and traditions. I am sorry that you misread the current situation between your sister and myself, but we both know you didn't do it because you were being sisterly, he growled back, his tone hard and angry, his grip hard enough to pull her arms away from him. She had to give ground unless she caves. Now, I am going to let you go. I expect you to collect your things and leave. Go to your den and hate fuck your mates, but there is nothing here for you. His visor slid off as he took an extra step, his back straight and arms pressing her down and away, her ears pinned back at the sight of his eyes and the rage of his visage. How can you reject me? I am the eldest daughter. You are a powerful male. You should be mine. She stammered out, her eyes scanning for an escape. David leaned in more to whisper into her ear, because Allis is better than you. His words break her resolve as she loses control and goes a bit limp in his arms, her knees hitting the ground and tears welling up. However, he let her go. Now leave before I tell Allis about your attempt to break her faith in me. Janris did as he had said, gathering her things quickly and leaving after setting her sash and closing her robe tight. Gaia, help me. David let out as the door slid closed after her. His hands found his sides and his legs needing a second as he sat down on his bed. His head still hurt a bit from the headache that had formed during that encounter. However, his door chimed again and his mind reeled. If it was anyone but Allis, he was going to kill someone. David let out a silent prayer as he saw Allis when the door opened, but she seemed distracted, looking at what was most likely Janris storming off. David, do you... She started but was cut short as David pulled her into a deep and reassuring kiss. One she starts to protest against before feeling his input on it, and as they pull away, she watches his eyes for a second. So that's what she was upset about. David gazed at her for a second before pulling a bit away. Yeah, she had miscalculated again like she did in the mess hall and at the trial. She seems to believe that you have me by your traditions alone when we have melded both mine and yours. David walked over to his dresser and found some clothes and a clean but damaged uniform jacket before turning back to Allis. However, she had stepped in and closed the door behind her, her stride to him intently swaying, her tail accentuating the movement of her hips, her hand slowly removing her jacket. Allis? David asked, a bit confused but aroused. She pressed him against his closet, her eyes spoke her will, a will to reward his faith. Stay still, I have learned something new, she said, her voice rich with excited nervousness, her hands slowly unbuttoning his jacket. She stopped for a second. It is my first time trying this, so don't make fun of me. She locked her eyes on his. I would never make fun of you, David said with a kiss.